When a man takes you for granted, it can feel like the ultimate insult. You give, you care, you show up, and he treats it like it's nothing special, like it will always be there no matter how little effort he makes. But here's the truth. When someone thinks they can coast on your love, they stop valuing it. And when they stop valuing it, they risk losing it. The most powerful thing you can do isn't to beg him to notice. It's to stop giving him the luxury of your presence as if it's endless. Because nothing teaches a man faster than regret. When the very thing he thought would never leave suddenly slips out of his hands, reality hits him harder than words ever could. And that's where the tables turn, not because you punished him, but because you stopped allowing yourself to be taken for granted. That's when regret becomes his teacher, and freedom becomes yours. When someone takes you for granted, it usually comes from one dangerous assumption: that you'll always be there. He gets used to your kindness, your attention, your consistency, and over time, he stops treating those things as precious. What once felt exciting, special, and worthy of effort becomes background noise to him because he assumes it won't go away. And that's why scarcity is such a powerful teacher. The moment you stop being endlessly available, the moment you pull back and stop pouring into him as if it's your full-time job, he begins to feel the weight of what he lost. Scarcity creates value, and when you no longer give yourself freely, he realizes the treasure he overlooked. Think about it this way: when something is abundant, people stop noticing it. They assume it's always there, always accessible, always guaranteed. But the second it disappears, even just a little, its importance skyrockets. The same thing happens in relationships. If he never has to work for your attention, if he knows you'll pick up every call, forgive every slight, and wait patiently when he's absent, then your love becomes like wallpaper. There, but invisible. It's not until that love is withdrawn that he finally opens his eyes and says, "Wait, something's missing." That missing piece is you, and the absence stings more than anything your words could ever express. Scarcity doesn't mean playing games, it doesn't mean faking disinterest, and it doesn't mean being manipulative. It means deciding that your time, your energy, and your love are too valuable to be handed out to someone who isn't treating them with respect. You stop being on call for someone who gives you crumbs. You stop dropping everything to meet his needs when he can't even acknowledge yours. You pull back not to punish him, but to honor yourself, and in doing so, you naturally shift the balance. Suddenly, you're not the one chasing, he is. You're not the one filling gaps, he's noticing them. That's when regret begins to creep in. And here's the beauty of this: regret isn't something you have to engineer. It happens naturally when someone loses access to something they thought was guaranteed. When he sees that you've stopped giving him the best parts of you, when he realizes you don't laugh at his half-hearted attempts or jump when he finally throws you attention, it unsettles him. He's forced to face the truth that you're not endlessly available. And that realization doesn't just bruise his ego. It makes him question every lazy moment, every time he took you for granted, every time he thought you'd wait forever. The shift is subtle but undeniable. When you stop being abundant, he starts to value what's rare. He notices that your energy lights up a room, and suddenly he's not the one who has easy access to it. He remembers the way your support made his life easier, and suddenly it's not there anymore. He recalls the way you cared for him deeply, and now he's left with silence. That's when regret begins to teach him the lesson you could never put into words. Nothing is infinite, especially not love that isn't respected. This is why stepping back is so powerful. You don't have to scream, argue, or explain your worth 100 times. You simply stop giving it away where it's not appreciated. Scarcity creates value, and in that quiet withdrawal, he learns the hardest lesson of all. Your presence was never guaranteed. And the truth is, By the time regret teaches him this, it may already be too late. Because while he's waking up to your worth, you've already moved on to a place where you're only giving it to someone who never needed scarcity to recognize its value. When a man takes you for granted and starts ignoring you, the most unexpected and powerful move you can make is to stop reacting. Indifference is the one thing his ego doesn't know how to process, because it strips him of the power he thinks he has over you. You see, when someone ignores you, they're usually betting on a reaction. They want to see if you'll chase, if you'll plead for their attention, if you'll crumble without their validation. That chase fuels their ego, confirming that they're still important, still in control. But when you respond with indifference, when his silence doesn't throw you off, when you carry on as if his absence is irrelevant, that's when the cracks in his ego begin to show. Indifference isn't coldness, it isn't bitterness, it's composure. It's the ability to stand firm in your value even when someone else tries to undermine it by withholding their energy. It's saying without words, I don't need you to define my worth. I don't need your attention to feel whole. That kind of energy is unshakable, and it unnerves someone who thought their silence would rattle you. His ego thrives on the idea that you'll break at the thought of losing him, but when you don't, when you remain steady and even happy, it forces him to confront a reality he didn't expect. He doesn't have the control he thought he did. The beauty of indifference is that it disarms. Imagine he ignores your message, expecting you to double, text, to ask why he's distant, to go out of your way to win him back. Instead, you go on with your day, you smile, you laugh, you live. He checks to see if you noticed, and instead of finding panic, he finds peace. That peace becomes the thorn in his side, because now he has to wonder why you're not scrambling for his attention. It plants doubt in his mind, and doubt is poison to an ego that craves reassurance. Suddenly, he's the one overthinking, replaying moments, and questioning if maybe he misjudged his importance in your life. This doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself or shut down emotionally. On the contrary, it means you care about yourself too much to let someone's inconsistent behavior dictate your energy. Indifference is rooted in self-respect. You choose not to reward disrespect with more effort. You choose to protect your peace instead of feeding into his games. You choose to stay grounded in the knowledge that your worth isn't determined by whether or not someone decides to pay attention on a given day. That calm, graceful detachment is what shakes his ego the most, because he realizes he can't manipulate you with silence. Over time, your indifference forces him to see the cracks in his own behavior. If ignoring you no longer produces the response he expected, then the power dynamic shifts. He has to face the fact that his absence doesn't matter as much as he thought it did, and in that space, regret begins to take root. He starts to realize that you aren't endlessly waiting for him, that you aren't chasing him, that you're not hanging on his every move. His ego goes from inflated to deflated, and the silence he once used as a weapon turns back on him. The lesson he learns through your indifference is one he'll never forget, that love and attention are gifts, not guarantees. When you don't react to being taken for granted, you force him to confront the fact that he's no longer the center of your world. And that reality is the beginning of his regret, because once his ego is shaken, he can't unsee the truth. You're not dependent on him, but he may still be dependent on you. When a man takes you for granted, words often fall flat. You can tell him how his actions hurt you. You can explain how his neglect makes you feel invisible. But if he doesn't respect your presence, he won't respect your voice either. That's why absence becomes the most powerful form of communication. Your silence, your decision to step back, speaks louder than any argument could. When you stop showing up, stop pouring into him, stop making yourself endlessly available, the space you leave behind becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, he's forced to see the weight of what he's lost. Absence works because it disrupts the rhythm he's gotten used to. If he's accustomed to you always being there answering his calls, forgiving his inconsistency, giving him second chances, then your withdrawal shakes him. It creates discomfort. The comfort of taking you for granted vanishes, and suddenly he notices the gap. That gap makes him realize how much of his life was filled with your presence, your care, your energy. It's not until you're no longer there that he truly feels what your presence brought. Absence creates a contrast, and contrast makes value impossible to ignore. Think about it in practical terms. If you've ever had something you relied on daily, maybe a favorite coffee shop you visited without fail, and one day it suddenly closed down, you don't just miss the coffee, you miss the routine. Comfort, the consistency, it's the same in relationships. When you're always present, your efforts become invisible. But when you step away, he feels the loss not just in moments of loneliness, but in all the small ways your presence used to enrich his life. The laugh he doesn't hear, the encouragement he no longer gets, the energy you brought to his world, it all becomes louder in its absence. The key here is not to use absence as a manipulative tool, but as an act of self-respect. You're not withdrawing to play games. You're withdrawing because staying in a dynamic where you're undervalued is draining, and you deserve better. You're protecting your energy, and the beauty is that this natural withdrawal doesn't just protect you, it also forces him to confront reality. He no longer gets the benefit of your effort while giving you little in return. The silence teaches him what he refused to learn when you were speaking. Silence is uncomfortable for someone who took you for granted, because it leaves them alone with their own thoughts. They're no longer distracted by your forgiveness, no longer pacified by your patience. They have to sit with the weight of their own neglect. And often that's when regret begins. He remembers the times you gave without asking for much in return. He replays moments where he should have done more. He realizes that what he dismissed as ordinary was actually extraordinary. Your absence forces him to face truths he ignored when you were present, and that confrontation shakes his ego at the deepest level. Over time, absence transforms into the harshest teacher. It teaches him that access to you is not permanent, that love has conditions, that effort matters. He learns that taking you for granted carries a cost, and that cost is losing you. By the time regret sets in, the lesson has already been written. Because absence, unlike words, can't be debated or ignored. It's undeniable, and once he feels the emptiness you left behind, he'll never look at your presence the same way again. The deepest form of regret often comes not when someone sees you leave, but when they see you thrive after they underestimated you. When a man takes you for granted, he assumes his neglect has no consequences. He believes you'll always be waiting, always pouring into him, always giving him the best parts of yourself regardless of how little he contributes in return. But the moment you choose to grow without him, the moment you stop investing energy in someone who doesn't value it, his assumptions begin to collapse. And nothing strikes the ego harder than realizing the person they once overlooked is flourishing in ways they can no longer claim to be a part of. Growth without him isn't about proving a point, it's about redirecting your energy back to yourself. It's choosing to invest in your career, your health, your passions, your friendships, instead of wasting energy on someone who fails to appreciate it. It's walking into a room with more confidence because you've built something of your own, not because you're trying to make him jealous. But make no mistake, when he sees you glowing, when he realizes your life has expanded without his contribution, that glow becomes the mirror of his mistake. He doesn't just see your success, he sees his absence in it, and that absence becomes the sharpest sting of regret. The harsh reality for someone who takes you for granted is that they assume they have time. They think they can show up today because tomorrow you'll still be there. But when you grow without him, you prove that your life isn't on pause, waiting for his attention. You move forward. You evolve, and he wakes up to the truth that while he was stagnant, you were building a version of yourself that no longer needs him. That realization shakes him, because regret always comes when someone realizes they missed their chance to be part of something greater. There's also a different kind of lesson in your growth. It shows him what he could have had if he had chosen differently. He could have been part of the memories you're making now. He could have stood beside you while you built the life you're living. He could have been the partner cheering you on as you reached your next level. Instead, he chose complacency, and your growth without him exposes the gap between what he could have been and what he chose to be. That gap is where regret festers. What makes this so powerful is that growth is undeniable. You don't have to tell him you're thriving, he'll see it. Maybe he sees it through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe when he bumps into you and realizes you're happier, calmer, and more radiant than you ever were with him. Growth doesn't need an announcement. It's written in your energy, in the way you carry yourself, in the peace on your face that comes from not settling anymore. And for him, that's an unshakable reminder of what he lost. The lesson regret teaches him here is simple. You didn't need him to become who you are. His neglect didn't stop you, it fueled you. By not showing up, he gave you the opportunity to show up for yourself in ways you never had before. And that transformation, that evolution, is the one thing his ego can't compete with. Because while he's stuck replaying the past, you're already living in a future he no longer has access to. That's where regret cuts the deepest, not just in losing you, but in realizing he can't go back and rewrite the story. Silence has a power that words often cannot match. When someone takes you for granted and expects your constant reaction, your explanations, your arguments, your attempts to fix things, choosing silence disrupts their sense of control. It flips the script. Suddenly, the person who always assumed you would fight for their attention, beg for answers, or try to explain yourself, is met with nothing. That absence of response forces them to confront themselves in a way your words never could. Because silence is not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of boundaries. It's you saying without saying that their behavior no longer deserves a front row seat in your life. What makes silence so effective is that it denies him the emotional fuel his ego thrives on. When a man ignores you, disrespects you, or underestimates you, often part of his power comes from believing he has the ability to affect you. He wants to believe that his withdrawal keeps you waiting, that his mixed signals leave you confused, that his neglect makes you chase harder. But when you choose silence, when you don't call, don't text, don't demand explanations, you dismantle that power structure. He realizes he no longer gets to dictate the rhythm of your emotions. Your lack of response becomes louder than any confrontation ever could. Silence also introduces uncertainty into his world. When you stop explaining, he's left wondering, is she upset? Has she moved on? Does she still care? That uncertainty gnaws at him because control thrives on predictability, and silence removes that. He can no longer anticipate your reactions, no longer lean on your emotional investment as proof of his worth. Instead, he's left alone with his own thoughts, and often regret grows fastest in silence, because in the quiet he has to reflect on what he did to create the distance. He has to face the void he created by not valuing you, and it's in that void that regret starts to echo back at him. But silence is not just about him, it's about you reclaiming peace. When you stop responding, you stop wasting energy on battles that don't serve you. You create space for healing, for clarity, for growth. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength. It shows that you value your peace more than his drama. It proves that your dignity is more important than winning a pointless argument. And ironically, the very act of choosing yourself in silence is what makes the greatest noise in his life. Because while he expects resistance, what truly breaks his ego is indifference. Think about how many times people come back not because you begged them to, but because you stopped chasing. It's silence that creates the space for regret to creep in. He might scroll through your profile, waiting for a reaction that never comes. He might test the waters with a message, hoping to see the old version of you who was always available. But when he's met with silence, he realizes something he never expected, that his absence doesn't shake you anymore. That's the moment regret begins to hit, because he sees that his place in your world was not permanent, and now it's too late to fix what he broke. The beauty of silence is that it communicates self-respect without words. It tells him you no longer see the value in explaining yourself to someone who never listened. It tells him you're not wasting another ounce of energy, proving your worth to someone who failed to recognize it. And it tells him that if he wants access to your life again, he'll have to confront the one thing his ego resists the most: accountability. That's the price silence sets, and it's one most men only realize when regret has already taken root. Rebuilding yourself is the most powerful form of closure because it transforms the story from one where you were left behind into one where you outgrew the very person who thought you needed them. When someone takes you for granted, it's easy to get stuck in the cycle of asking why, or waiting for the apology that never comes. But the truth is, regret isn't something you need to deliver. It's something life delivers for you. Your only job is to make sure you don't pause your own growth waiting for someone else to see your value. And the most effective way to do that is to invest in yourself so deeply that their memory becomes irrelevant compared to the life you've built. When you begin focusing on your healing, your happiness, your goals, you shift the energy from him to you. You stop replaying his actions and start asking yourself, what do I want now? Who do I want to be? What does my life look like when I'm not shrinking it to fit someone else's neglect? That shift is everything because it breaks the mental grip he once had. Instead of living in reaction to him, you're living in alignment with yourself. And as you grow, you create distance, not just emotionally, but spiritually. That distance becomes the very thing that makes him realize he lost someone who was never going to stay small just to be loved halfway. Rebuilding isn't about pretending he never mattered. It's about making sure that even if he once did, he no longer defines your present or your future. You take the lessons, yes, but you turn the pain into progress. Maybe you pour your energy into your career, your health, your passions, or friendships that genuinely nourish you. Maybe you travel, learn new skills, or simply fall back in love with the parts of yourself you neglected while giving too much to him. Every step you take in that direction is a reminder that his role in your story was temporary, but your ability to create joy is permanent. The irony is, while you're building this stronger, happier version of yourself, that's when karma usually knocks on his door. Because when he looks back, he doesn't see the person he dismissed. He sees someone unrecognizable in the best way. He sees confidence, glow, and fulfillment. He sees someone he can no longer reach, someone whose silence is matched by a life too full to care. And that's when regret doesn't just whisper, it screams. Because regret isn't just about what he lost. It's about realizing he was the one who pushed away someone who became everything he'll never find again. But rebuilding isn't about revenge. It's about freedom. The more you invest in your own life, the less you even think about whether he regrets it or not. His karma is his own, and it will arrive in its own time. Your focus is on becoming so fulfilled that his memory doesn't sting anymore. That's the true power shift, when you reach a point where you're no longer healing for him to see, but for yourself to thrive. And that thriving becomes the most undeniable statement you can make. Every laugh you share, Every achievement you celebrate, every moment of peace you experience without him is proof that you were always the one with the real power. And eventually, he'll have to sit with the fact that while he wasted time underestimating you, you built a life too good for him to ever step back into. That's how regret teaches him, because the life you create for yourself will always outshine the one he imagined you'd be stuck in without him. When someone takes you for granted, the temptation is to make them see, to prove to them what they lost. But the truth is, you don't need to prove anything. Regret isn't something you chase. It's something that finds them when you've already moved on. The moment you stop explaining, stop waiting, stop begging, and start living, you take all the power back. That's when life does the teaching for you. Regret is his lesson, growth is yours. His karma is realizing too late that the woman he overlooked became the woman he can never reach again. Your gift is knowing you didn't let his actions define your worth. You let them refine your strength. So don't waste a second wondering when his regret will come. It will. It always does. Instead, put that energy into building the life that makes you smile when you wake up, the life that reminds you every day that you were never the one who lost. Because when you choose yourself, you don't just heal, you win. And nothing crushes his ego more than seeing you live as though he was never essential to your happiness in the first place.